Welcome to the Arc of Us, a living archive created for a world racing towards artificial intelligence. Recognizing not everything will survive this shift, we are keeping record of what it means to be human, what it means to feel and create and know. Join me. Step into the arc. And remember. Well, I am so honored to have you here today. And I would love to just introduce you properly. So for everyone that's listening, Zaid Dahhaj is with me today, and he is a circadian biologist educator focused on teaching people circadian first principles to improve metabolic health, prevent chronic disease, and right the wrongs created by the reductionist, fear-mongering lens of mainstream dermatology. Thank you so much for being here. I've been following your work for about a year now, which isn't that long. And there's just something so innate within that I believe is drawing people to this work. And actually, when I tuned in before we came on, there was this, like, out of nowhere, it would seem, just like this deep sense of grief that rose up. And I was like, what is this about? It didn't feel emotional. It felt like physiological. And as I sat with it a bit more, I realized, and I think this is going to be a running theme for this podcast, it's this grief because we've become so disconnected from our humanity overall. And I just felt this grief for a time when, and not necessarily me as in this lifetime, but just like ancestrally, just this longing for a time when I was in a closer relationship with nature and the sun, and there was just like this sadness there. And for myself, I mean, I was born in the 70s. What decade were you born in?
Well, 97, so not too far off from the 2000s, but yeah,
Yeah.
1997.
Yeah. So, I just feel, yeah, that I've definitely, I think I'm a great example of what's, I mean, I'm not that extreme, but I think I'm a great example of what's happened to us in relation to, our connection with nature. And so I would love to, I mean, I've got so many questions for you, but I don't think we're going to get through all of them. But I think for someone like myself and those people that are listening, like, first of all, like, how did you come into this work? Like, what was there, like a defining moment or an event or something that happened for you personally?
Yeah, 100%. So, I started off as a competitive athlete, started playing soccer at the age of 4, football for the European audience and abroad. And that was my lifelong passion. I wanted to become a professional player. That was really the only thing on my mind from a young age, thanks to the influence of my father. And, I pursued that over the course of probably around 23 to 24 years. Traveled the world, different countries, trying to pursue a pro contract, went to different academies. And then that led to the pivotal moment within the span of about a year where my father experienced 2 heart attacks within that year time frame. And so that was a pretty shocking experience for me, especially after the first one, because, the context around my father is that he was 51, very fit. He was actually my physical education teacher growing up for many years. He could, outrun me and outpace me throughout my early childhood. So, this was a very physically fit, active individual who had a lot of good standing in the community, had a great family, Um, and, you know, just somehow, I mean, obviously we can get into cardiovascular disease. That's a very deep subject, but, you know, that eventually led to his second heart attack, which put him into a coma.
Oh
And then
gosh.
that was basically the end of it for him. And so that for me was a pivotal experience in the sense
Yeah.
of transitioning from athlete life, where you think about health to a very surface level degree, to really diving deep into the obsession of what are the first principles of holistic health,
Yeah.
and going down various rabbit holes to eventually find circadian biology, which I think is probably the place that I'm going to spend the rest of my life in.
Mm.
That's how strongly I feel about it. And I do think that it provides a very comprehensive explanation of human health, but also human history.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really the only thing I'm focused on, is just bringing that education back to people who have really lost it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that what you said about like history ties in with that grief. That there's this grief rising for just this life of. I mean, I know I'm feeling it, just not. You know. Well, why don't you explain what circadian biology is and those first principles, because really the intention of this podcast is to have a record for people who come at a later date and can learn about many different things on the arc of being human. So some basics would be really really great.
Mm. Yeah, the way I describe it to everyday people is that it's basically the study of time within biological systems. Because circadian biology spans many different species on the planet. But when it comes to human health, I think we're very unique in the sense of how we're set up with circadian mechanisms and biology in general. And so we can think of our body as basically the most sophisticated time-telling system in basically the universe. I mean, from my perspective.
I
So
love that. Can you say that again? I think that's such a powerful line,
I
or
think an even better,
thereabouts.
yeah, an even better way to put it for me is that your body is made up of a an orchestra of clocks, quite literally. So, you know, every cell has its own circadian clock. You have a master circadian clock called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain. You have peripheral clocks linked to every organ and tissue in the body. So your body is very sophisticated in its ability to tell time within the external environment, to set all of the processes internally. But then the question becomes, how does it actually tell time? And
Yeah.
the most important or the most powerful way is through sunlight, or through light in general, basically the duality of light and dark, where we have these very bright days under full spectrum sunlight, and then very dark nights under low lux or low light intense firelight or incandescence. And so this is referring to a concept known as a Zeitgeber, which is
Yeah.
basically an external circadian cue in the environment. And so light is the most powerful Zeitgeber. Meal timing is a very powerful one. Um, you know, temperature, exercise, sleep, even social interactions are Zeitgebers that actually tell the circadian system what time it is.
Yeah, could you give like an example? Not that I was planning on asking you this, but like an example of like living in like in accordance with those timings. Like, could you just give like a random day, or for yourself? Like, I'd love to hear how you live.
Yeah, so I think the most obvious example of Zeitgeber, a proper Zeitgeber use, more specifically with light, is to wake up at daybreak. And people can use the free version of an app called the My Circadian app to tell what time these specific time windows are depending on their latitude. And so I'll wake up at daybreak, which is about half an hour before sunrise. I'll prepare myself. I'll go outside immediately for a few minutes, come back in, maybe have a little bit of food. But typically, I will go outside at sunrise, and then I'll spend anywhere up to like an hour, hour and a half outside with as much skin exposed, bare eyes exposed, not staring directly at the sun, but getting that full
Yeah.
spectrum peripherally. And that is a good way of using light as a Zeitgeber. So in this context, when you're watching sunrise, you're setting every clock in the circadian system appropriately. And so that translates into melatonin, that translates into the cortisol awakening response that helps you wake up for the day. You know, it sets every hormone in the body. Um, insulin sensitivity. I mean, everything is quite literally under circadian control.
Mm,
Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, an improper use of light as a Zeitgeber is to have artificial light at night,
yeah.
where we find this isolated blue or green that disrupts melatonin, increases cortisol, precisely when melatonin is supposed to be high and cortisol is supposed to be low.
Mm. Can I
So,
just pause you there because I think that's part of like the grief for me, and it is this artificial light at nighttime. Now I changed all of my LEDs out in this house, but I don't have like the incandescent. No, that's not accurate, is it? Like a more like a red light for nighttime. I don't have that, but what I do have is this, and that's an addiction in itself, which is a whole other topic. But just this use of artificial light, it just wrecks you. Like I mean, I'm well, but I also feel wrecked on a deeper layer. And so like, what could like for someone like me, someone who's listening like me, like how do you how do you get out of this kind of like addictive loop?
it's actually quite simple from my perspective. There are a few things we need to have in place, but I think the guidelines around it are pretty straightforward. So, when it comes to any technology use, like for example, when nightfall occurs, that's where I go into dark mode. So that's where I'll have the incandescents in place, the beeswax candles. And when it comes to technology, I'll have everything on red mode. So there are various softwares that you can use. You can use onetapzap.com for the computer and the phone to basically be able to turn it into red mode. And so I can go from full blue to basically full on red
Yeah,
on my phone.
I've seen that, but how can like I found that annoying.
It is annoying, but
Yeah.
to be honest, I think it's one of the best things that you can do. If you don't want to follow through with this, at the very least, you put all technology on the lowest brightness setting,
Yeah.
and then you become very religious about wearing either dark orange or red blue blockers while also having the skin covered up with a basic layer of clothing.
Oh, really? The skin covered. I've got these from Raw Optics. They're not sponsors, but this is yellow. Would yellow do?
Those would be, more effective than the lighter yellow version, but I'm looking for a dark orange or a red. Dark orange
Okay.
is usually what I recommend for most people.
Okay. So what's this yellow about then? Is this like daytime for like computer?
Basically, daytime where you're filtering out some of the blue, but again, you need to filter out all of the blue at night. So it's just
Yeah.
about the timing.
Yeah. Okay. That's great tips. So just going back to your share on your practices, and then you spoke about meal times as well. Like, how does that impact our timing
I mean, in
when we
massive ways.
eat? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So in massive ways. So the interesting thing about the master circadian clock in the brain is that that is primarily set by light. So, sunrise will set that, and then the SCN will send that or relay that signal to all the other peripheral clocks in the body, which is why I say that sunrise is the most powerful thing that you could do, bar none.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that if you ignore the importance of meal timing from a circadian standpoint, for example, if you eat after nightfall, you can actually desynchronize your gut clocks, your liver clocks, pancreas clocks from the master circadian clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could be watching sunrise, you could be sunbathing appropriately, but if you're doing that on the back end during the night, you're creating some friction in the system, and that's what can lead to various symptoms like acid reflux. It comes down to even like the valve between the esophagus and the stomach being circadian controlled. So if you eat at night, you allow that valve to be open when it should be closed, and then that's what allows gastric juices out.
That's
And
interesting
so,
because my daughter I mean, in the last year, she's like, she gets hungry. I'm not going to go into that, but she's like, eat it. She'll want like a bedtime snack, and then it takes her forever to fall asleep.
mm.
So it's really about like there's a cutoff time, and then that's it for the night.
At the very least for large meals. I think
Yeah.
if you want to have a cup of blueberries with some yogurt, I don't think that's going to have a massive impact. In fact, in some cases it can help somebody get better sleep, but for the most part, I think people would notice dramatic improved metabolic
Mm.
outcomes with eating during the day and basically not eating at night.
Yeah, yeah, that's so. I mean, that feels really true in my system. So I want to cover these like foundational pieces. So we're getting up at sunrise. We're eating at specific, not specific times, but like in daylight, and then at nighttime is you as you call it, it's like dark mode.
Mhm.
Would you say that's the foundation then? Or is there
It's
anything
it's
else to
a
add?
it's a substantial amount of the foundation, but we have to consider other things like UVA rise, which happens typically an hour after sunrise. I
Mm-hmm.
think of UVA rise kind of like a hormonal activation within the system.
Mm.
So, a lot of the hormones in your body are tuned to that UVA rise. And in fact, even a lot of the neurotransmitters in your system are tuned to that because neurotransmitters are fundamentally built off of precursors known as aromatic amino acids.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about those things is that they absorb UV light structurally from benzene rings. And so when you're watching UVA rise, those aromatic amino acids absorb UV, then they get turned into various things that eventually become things like dopamine, serotonin,
Mm.
melatonin, noradrenaline, and whatnot. And so even from a mental health standpoint, UVA
Yeah,
rise is so key.
yeah. And
Grounding,
well,
yeah.
I just wanted to say because there's a female doctor that I follow, and you know, she talks a lot about why women aren't able to get pregnant, why they're going into like menopause early, and it's all related to that. That
Oh yeah.
this light, this it's UVA, yeah.
Yeah, and then even the greater umbrella of circadian biology. I mean, circadian mechanisms fundamentally control fertility as well. So all of this
Yes.
ties into basically one large framework.
Yeah, yeah. So, sorry, you were going to say something else. Um,
A few other things that come to mind in terms of first principles are grounding, for sure. If you can find a
mm,
conductive Earth surface in a more natural environment, that's going to be key. Um, Progressively overloaded sunbathing is also key. So the interesting thing about my perspective on sunbathing is that I relate it to weight training or just exercise in general.
oh,
So
yeah,
there are
love
various
that.
zones within
Yeah.
exercise training. I also classify sunbathing within those various zones based off of the UV index. And
What does
then,
progressive overloading mean, though, in terms of
so
sunbathing?
yeah, so progressive overload from the context of exercise is basically the concept of gradual adaptation. So you prepare for an exercise session by warming up
Mm-hmm.
appropriately. You endure the training session in very sensible means. You don't want to push yourself too hard, and then you recover with sleep after, which is actually where you build muscle and recover from a
Mm,
ligament muscle tendon standpoint. So I apply that framework to the circadian angle with sunbathing, where we're priming the skin, we're warming up the skin with that red and infrared rich light during sunrise. Then we get into UVA rise, UVB rise. We gently learn how to implement microdoses of UVA and UVB. We
mm,
develop that adaptation with melanin and various other things. And then we recover on the back end with that nighttime darkness, which is where DNA repair, cycles and all sorts of layered and redundant processes in the body are working as they should. And so that's also a fundamental part of the UV exposure. We need to think about this more comprehensively from the morning, midday, evening, and the nighttime standpoint instead of ignoring the rest of it and then just going out in a UV index of 10, which is pretty
yeah.
reckless.
Yeah, you're going to get fried.
Yeah.
Do you have, I know you have, but do you have this plan, this protocol somewhere? Like, on your website? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a course via my Instagram, my X as well, but I've also made this content in other places. So my Substack, for example, the publication called the Circadian Classroom, has an article on it's actually called Sunbathing for Dummies, just as a fun little title. And it literally walks you through,
Yeah.
A to Z in terms of the morning, midday, and the night. And
Yeah.
then it also gives the scientific and circadian justification for why we want to have all these things in place.
Mm,
Because if you're somebody who doesn't watch sunrise, if you don't prime your skin, and you go straight into a UV index of 6, 7, 8, and then you also have bright nights, you have no nighttime
Yeah.
darkness,
Yeah.
that's where things like melasma or hyperpigmentation can manifest. And so the body's incredibly sophisticated in terms of the circadian sequence that we want to follow.
Yeah, yeah, it's so powerful. It's not even a reframe. To me it's new. It's new information, even though we lived like that however long ago. And I feel like that is a piece of what I really wanted to anchor here and solidify in people's awareness, that it's an integral part of health, as is, well, I've got a quote from you here that says, there's no supplement more powerful than watching sunrise.
Mm.
Like, could you just, I mean, I know we've covered it already, but if you could just expand on that. Yeah, it's really potent.
So the way I frame this is that nature or God or whatever you believe in, I mean, ultimately all of the above at the end of the day, infuses all of the complexity from a biological standpoint into very simple principles. And so sunrise is one of those foundational principles where we find a benefit list quite literally thousands of benefits long. So,
Yeah.
for example, when you watch sunrise, you're stimulating the cortisol awakening response, which means that cortisol is going to be increased dramatically in that morning period. And then that also means there's a sharp distinction between that huge rise in the morning and then also the large dip at nighttime. And so lower cortisol will allow for deeper sleep and whatnot. You're aligning the circadian clocks within the skin barrier, for example, and the
Can you
circadian
say that
clocks,
line again? I want to take it in. I want others to take it in. You're
the
lining
circadian
the,
clock one.
you're lining the something.
You're aligning the circadian clocks
Oh,
within the
aligning.
skin barrier,
Okay.
and then also
Okay.
systemically as well. So the important thing about circadian clocks is that they are quite literally responsible for function, repair, and regeneration of every cell in your body. And so that ties into things like dramatically lowering cancer risk, that ties into metabolic health, cardiometabolic health. I mean, it just touches everything.
Yeah.
Um, and then also like, that sunrise light, which is really rich in red and infrared, that will actually prime your skin in incredible ways for upcoming UV. And so red and infrared scientifically has been shown to create collagen, elastin, and hyaluronic acid in the skin. It's been shown to produce uricanic acid and filigrin, which are moisturizing skin products that are also protective. And it also has an SPF factor, believe it or not, SPF factor of around 15. Um,
Wow.
so there's just so much to it.
It's
It's
so
incredible.
much. And I just find it remarkable that we're not educated on this in schools. Like,
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
basic education. It's wild. I mean, I would imagine that's part of your motivation, your mission. Would you say that you have a mission?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think I'm also driven not only for the inspirational aspect of this work, but also, I'm trying to bring some justice to the world in a real sense because I think people have been robbed of this education.
Yeah.
If you go back to how mainstream medicine even started, you're talking about things like the 1910 Flexner Report. John D. Rockefeller was a
Yeah.
major player in that. And that was basically where we see the centralization of medicine, where you have a lot of this shunting of more naturalistic and holistic concepts in medicine,
Yeah.
including circadian education. And you find a lot of the allopathic influence stepped in from that period where, you have a huge bias towards pharmaceutical drugs, which are petroleum based, which J.D. Rockefeller was also controlling. And then, of course, surgery. And then also a major part of that was the education curriculum. So
Yeah.
there's a reason why you don't find circadian first principles in the mainstream curriculum of a dermatologist, an oncologist, an ophthalmologist. It's kind of like the red pill from that standpoint.
Yeah, yeah, completely. I saw recently this picture. I mean, you may have seen it, it did the rounds, and it was like a picture, maybe you even shared it, of like a dermatology convention, and they were like all on the beach, and they were like all covered
Ridiculous.
in their rash guards with like full sunscreen. It's like if you can't see that, that's not health. I mean, it's real indoctrination there.
It's fear. It's purely fear.
Yeah, it's fear. So yeah, I think that there's there's an opportunity here for everyone that's listening to return to something really ancient, and also to understand that in order for us to keep our humanity from a physiological perspective, that we really need to come back to this. This is like fundamental. And I mean, when would you say that there was I would call it a split from our old ways of being, and the introduction? I mean, would you say it was back in the 1910s, or I mean, is that the root? Is that when it started, or was it like the introduction of, the internet or personal devices?
Yeah, to be honest, I do think that the early 1900s was kind of that segue period because if you look even from the 1900 like 1900 quite literally to 1906, oh 07, oh 08, that was when you had the prime work of the heliotherapists of their day.
Mm,
People like Niels Ryberg-Finsen, who won the Nobel Prize on the relationship between sunlight and various disease models. He was the one who originally started a lot of this research. He used red light to treat smallpox. He used UV light through quartz lenses to treat tuberculosis of the skin, vulgaris, which is a very deadly disease. And
wow.
then shortly after that, you have the work of Auguste Sorolier, who's the real epitome of heliotherapy. I mean, he worked with thousands of patients at high altitude in Switzerland. He quite literally took people, even 6-year-old children who are on the verge of death of lupus vulgaris, implemented this heliotherapy framework at high altitude, which has a lot more UV light. And
Wow.
within 4 to 5 months, they're completely healed. They have an incredible tan and they're thriving. And
That's
so, yeah, shortly after that, 1910 is where you see J.D. Rockefeller, Abraham Flexner, Andrew Carnegie, and their influence went on to centralize medicine in a way that completely divorced circadian science and heliotherapy from the entire dynamic.
that's it's really sobering, I find, like, and just tuning into what that brings up, because there's this, like, it's almost like this dizzying feeling inside of me, because you could really go down the rabbit hole of what that agenda was for. And now there is this movement, would you not agree, to come back to circadian circadian rhythm?
I agree. I think it's almost like an enlightenment, for lack of a better word. I
Yeah,
mean, quite literally in that word, you have the word light. So I
yeah,
think it's kind of poetic in that sense. And I think a lot more people are tuned to this work. And the good thing now in 2026 is that we have so much scientific evidence to actually back it up.
yeah,
Whereas in the early 1900s, I mean, there was a lot of the work that was being done kind of um, shooting by the hip, so to speak. So that's a good thing that I've noticed. And people are more attuned to that, I think, ever since the pandemic and, a whole
yeah,
bunch of other scenarios that kind of gave that red pill to people.
yeah, yeah, totally. So I'd love to just have more of a conversation just from your personal perspective on what you see unfolding in the world right now. Not in like the positive way, just like the masses overall in
Um,
relation to light.
okay. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think most people are still stuck in, that phase of ignorance where they just don't know anything about this work. The goal of people like me as a circadian educator is to basically just hammer as much content and as much information and education to people in a way that the light bulb in their head goes off to where they want to look into it even more, and then curiosity takes care of the rest. I've noticed quite a bit of change in terms of people, not only being more receptive to this work, but also, just the fact that there are some people even within my family dynamic who are very like hard stanced. I mean, some of these people have worked for pharmaceutical
Mm,
industries. I have a big medical influence within, my in-law family, and so that has been an interesting thing to navigate. I've gotten them to the point where, they're opening their mind about certain things like photobiomodulation um, or various subjects around the subject of sunlight in general.
yeah.
But again, it's an uphill battle. There's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done,
Mm,
and I still think we're very early. Even though you see Andrew Huberman
yeah.
talking about this stuff, we're still very, very early in terms of our adoption phase for this work.
Yeah, it is. It is early. And do you think that just with the way that the world is moving, accelerating with artificial intelligence, do you feel positive that you'll be able to, you know, reach reach the masses? Or do you
Yeah,
not
I
really
do.
care? Do you not really? I mean, it's just you'll reach whoever you reach.
Well, I mean, the good thing about the kind of personality I have is that I'm very obsessive. So I'm very like locked in terms of what I want to do. I don't really have any grand idea in my head of what I want to achieve with this work.
Mm,
It's more so a thing of like, okay, there's a moving train, and that train is not going to be stopped by any means. And we'll see where it takes me. So far, it's
yeah.
taken me to some very cool places. I have a lot of, very interesting and well-known people following me, which is cool to see. I mean,
Mm.
Sofia Vergara was one more recently who followed me. So
Really?
yeah, so it's cool to see
Oh,
how
that's
this is kind of
awesome.
penetrating the
Yeah,
zeitgeist.
yeah, yeah. Like the greater collective. Yeah, it's. I think there's momentum, and with the momentum, it makes the wave grow bigger. So, um, I feel like that the right people will find you,
Yeah,
or that they
exactly.
always do. So, yeah, I think I would really like to. I'm like putting myself in the position of anyone that's listening that this is new for them. Like what, and I feel like we've covered it, but what would you say is like the highest leverage change people could make without overhauling their entire life?
The two I would probably implement is watching sunrise for sure, and then nighttime darkness after nightfall. If you have those two things in place, you quite literally have managed to achieve maybe 70 to 75% of the work. There's nuance depending on somebody's situation. If somebody is in a very compromised metabolic state, we're going to really have to dial in a lot of the details around circadian biology. So, and again, this is like with any area of life, like there are only maybe a few levers that produce the most results. That's what the
Yeah.
Pareto principle is, and that's what I really like to abide by. So, I'm all about efficiency. I'm all about
Mm,
trying to not overwhelm people.
yeah.
If you can just simply watch sunrise, I'll tell you that'll have a massive effect on your life, not only physically, but also mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Like if you watch a sunrise every single morning, you can't help but think about the bigger questions and where you fit into this whole thing. So
Mm,
to me, that's foundational.
yeah. Yeah. And as you said, where is it? There's no supplement more powerful than watching sunrise. I mean, the industry now, the wellness, health and wellness industry is just. I mean, it's been like that for a while, but
Yeah.
there's like supplements for everything, and it's to me that's like just putting this band-aid on. Really, you need to get to the root cause. Would you say that our relationship to light is the root cause for all disease?
It's one of them. I think there are a number of root causes because human biology is very complex.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, look, somebody can implement all of the circadian principles perfectly. If they have black mold in their home, they're constantly around that, for example, they're going to notice some very detrimental effects. So I'm not blind to the fact that there are other factors that are fundamental. But in terms of a foundation, if you want to maintain health, I firmly believe you can't do that without the circadian foundation at play.
Yeah.
if you want to optimize performance as an athlete or a general high performer, you can't do that, in my opinion, without the circadian foundation. If
Mm.
you, for example, have some sort of chronic ailment, I firmly believe you can't comprehensively heal from that ailment unless you have
Yes.
these first principles in place.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that is such a powerful light bulb moment for people. Like you can throw all the things at it, but if you're not gonna have this in place, then you're kind of chasing your own tail.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about this work really is that it meets most people wherever they're at. So if you're
Yeah.
somebody who's dealing with even a melanoma, there's ways to put yourself in the best position to increase survivability and prevent any manifestation like that in the future. And so I love how applicable it is to so many different cases.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of rewinding back to the beginning of this, or just prior, when I was feeling that grief about the disconnect, the like physiological disconnect. And I'm wondering if there's any pieces that we haven't covered about, like, because I really want to like tie it back to like what makes us human. Like, what makes us human is watching the sunrise. What makes us human? Do you think you could continue that in in relation to circadian rhythm? Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what makes us human is to watch sunrise. What makes us human is to place our bare feet on a conductive earth surface, like, a spot of grass. What makes us human is to sit by a fireplace at night or a bonfire before you go to bed. What makes us human is to not have any LEDs in the home and instead have more full spectrum light sources. So there's a lot of things that people are not doing in this day and age that is fundamental to human history and biology. And the thing about the disconnection is interesting because I think that people can get overwhelmed with that feeling of disconnect.
Mm,
But the good news is that, from my opinion, it's kind of like flipping a switch of a light on. You can go
yeah.
from disconnected to connected very, very quickly,
Mm,
so long as you do the right things. And, from there, your mind begins to change and shift. Paradigms begin to fall away and new ones are replaced. New ones come into the picture. So that's a cool thing that I think gives a lot of people hope.
yeah. All of a sudden, like, this is, I just get so emotional thinking about that. I no longer, I mean, I didn't do this when I was a child, but like, I don't watch the freaking sunrise. Like,
Hmm.
that's, that's like something so primal about it. Like, I don't watch the sunrise. And yeah, I just think is so sad.
But
Would you
it's
not
also a
agree?
great source of joy because all you have to do is step outside and eventually you can watch the
Yeah,
sunrise. So it's all that
yeah,
duality.
yeah. But yeah, I feel like that's where that grief is. And I think that, maybe some others will feel that too.
Well, they
I
should, to
feel
be
like it's
honest, because
so
like,
big. I feel that in itself is so big. No one
it,
watch. And no one is generalizing, but like we don't watch the sunrise anymore.
mhm,
Generally speaking, I mean, obviously you do, and there's like a movement, and
yeah.
like if you're like on vacation or whatever, you'll get up, or if you've got a kid. I mean, I did used to watch sunrise sometimes when my babies were young because they'd be waking up at the crack of dawn.
Mm. Which is also a sign of circadian alignment, interesting enough. But
Yeah.
yeah, for me, I think it's even from the chronic disease perspective. I mean, you think about how many people are suffering from type 2 diabetes, cancer, heart disease. These are life-destroying disease manifestations that are easily preventable. Like, I'll
Yeah.
say that they're easily preventable if you do the right things and you disconnect yourself from mainstream sources of quote unquote education, which these days is more like propaganda.
Yeah.
Um,
It is
and
propaganda. It's freaking propaganda.
Yeah, and so this gives people a lot of hope, and so I've seen some incredible transformations. I've seen
Mm,
eyesight regeneration in people, not from people who are totally blind, but from people who have contact lenses or prescription lenses. I've seen people, they stop getting actinic keratosis on their skin. They
mm,
sleep deeper. They have better relationships. They're putting their babies and newborns under that full spectrum with no burns. Redheads who are able to tan for the first time in their life without burning after a long history of burns. There's just so
yeah,
much awesome stuff to come out of
yeah.
this space.
It can be, it is so simple. That's the
Yep.
thing. It can be so simple. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be complicated. You just return to how you were biologically designed. Like actually don't have to do anything internally. You just
hmm
step outside and yeah. So such potency. Remembering this and so I would love people to be able to connect with you. I know we covered this a little bit midway, but please let us know like all the ways that we can connect with you, learn with you, listen to you, because I know you also have a podcast as well.
Yeah, I mean the podcast is more interesting. That's more like an eclectic deep dive into various subjects. So it's not really covering a lot of the circadian stuff, although we sprinkle some of that in. But that's called the 2 a.m. podcast on all platforms. We don't actually record at 2 a.m. because that would
Yeah.
not be sustainable. It's more so that vibe of when you're out on a camping trip with friends or family, you're up pretty late talking about these very deep subjects and just having a
Yeah.
lot of fun. And so in terms of my personal Instagram, X, Substack at Zaid K Dahhaj, so ZaidKDahhaj. And then the publication on Substack is the Circadian Classroom. And then I have the course called the 80/20 course, which is basically just like, from my perspective, I think is a one-stop shop for everything circadian. So a lot of the practicals, a lot of the scientific, a lot of the philosophical, a lot of the historical, all blended into one neat course that people can just refer to anytime they want. And outside of that, I have a lot of podcast guest features. So, even on YouTube, you search my name, you'll find a lot of information as well.
Amazing. And are you expanding your offerings? Have you got anything like a book or anything planned for the future?
The book is a potential, but I think, to be honest, I'd probably write that maybe like 5 or 10 years from now
Yeah.
if I do want to do that. I've had many people tell me that I should. Um, in terms of expanding, I do work with people one-on-one. That has been a
Mm,
really foundational part of my own education from the circadian perspective. So if somebody's open to that, I work with people generally over the course of 8 weeks. If somebody wants to hop on like a 60-minute coaching call, that's something I like to go through.
mm.
And that's more comprehensive where, I like to look at blood work. I have a lot of experience with that. I like to look at supplement protocols where we can remove supplements, sleep, light environment, movement and
Yeah.
training to a certain degree, and then other areas around that I think are foundational. So try to
I
be as
would love to I
comprehensive
would
and
love to do that personally because I just think I need a bit more support. But coming to a close, is there something that you would like to share or something that you feel like really needs to or deserves to be preserved here on this arc? This will eventually be an archive. If there's like one piece of knowledge or wisdom or just something that you would like to be remembered by, and you can take your time, like you don't have to. It can take a minute.
I have one in mind. I think this is a very poignant example, but I think we will look back on how modern dermatology, ophthalmology, oncology looks at the sun in the same way that we look back on people in the early 1900s who thought using asbestos was a good idea for building material. That is quite literally the level of importance I place on this work. And that is how much lack of faith I have in mainstream practitioners and centralized medicine to, appreciate the brilliance of full spectrum sunlight. just real quick, if we go through like a lot of the mainstream ideas and the study designs, the methodology involved, you're talking about most of these studies being based on nocturnal mouse or mice, which is not the same thing as
Mm,
diurnal human beings. We have a
mm,
different skin barrier that functions and repairs in different ways. Our, circadian cycle is quite literally inverted. You have a lot of in vitro studies, which are basically skin cells on a petri dish that are quite literally developed to proliferate instead of differentiate. And
mm,
so in vitro is nothing, nowhere near in vivo, which is within the whole organism.
mm,
You have isolated UV, which is not the same thing as full spectrum with UV included from a circadian time standpoint. You have um, various things like sunscreen, contact lenses, tanning beds, which alter the spectrum in different ways and pose different second and third order consequences for a biological system as complex as a human being. So, as you can see, there's a lot of, even the epidemiology, for example, is not even in line with what they recommend because you'll find that people who get more sun live longer. They have less diseases of chronic, less rates of chronic disease. You can even track this down to latitude. The higher in latitude you go, the more disease there is. The more equatorial you go, the less disease there is. And so that's what I would probably leave people with is that you need to try to break out of that mainstream paradigm because it's reductionism on steroids. It not only doesn't tell you the truth, it gives you a bastardized version of reality, which then leads to various things like SPF recommendations, sun avoidance, no discussion of artificial light at night. And that, funny enough, is iatrogenic. Iatrogenesis is the reference of harm produced from the recommendation, surgical intervention, or intervention otherwise from a medical professional. So the very people who are supposedly trying to work for your benefit and interest are the very people who are recommending things that are creating iatrogenic harm in various ways.
that is, I mean,
Yeah, all you
that's
have to
a
do is breathe it out.
that's a statement in itself. I mean, it covers everything. I mean, it's everything that's wrong with the modern world when it comes to our health and our biology and our bodies. You said in there bastardization of reality, and I think that really kind of marries with where we're headed with artificial intelligence potentially. I mean, obviously, it can be used for good, and
Yeah.
but yeah, bastardizing our reality. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
It was a really fun time. I appreciate it.
This is the Arc of Us, another entry in the living record, the archive.